that's why we have a little delay in starting up, because we want to make sure that at least some of you are here, the majority of you are here. So that's why we started a little bit later. I apologize, but that's then due to the wisdom of the crowd to not collectively show up on time. So today we have JONATAS MANZOLLI as our first speaker. After that we will do the public debate with Tony Prescott and myself as I think the main actors here in the front, and we will focus very much on this whole theme of self and consciousness, going back to the talks that we had. And it's also very much up to you to provide content for that, right? So Tony and I, we can talk forever about these things, but it might not interest you very much. So it's also very much now up to you as members of the crowd to perturb the process and be prepared with your questions. So I would recommend that each of you meditates a little bit now already on what kind of question you would have, and at least you have one. So we're going to have a microphone here in front, and that's also...
No, you guys will sit there,
we
and
sit
we
there.
will pass with the microphone.
Okay, the microphone will go around from the back to the front, and everyone's going to have one question. Okay? And that follows the principle of one brain, one question that we use in specs in all our lab meetings. All right, this is organizational. Other organizational things, Anna?
After the...
Okay, after the talk. So, it's great JONATAS MANZOLLI is here. So, I met JONATAS in '98, so that's a long time ago, when I was in Brazil giving a talk on DEC, and at the University of Campinas, where JONATAS is working. And then, okay, we were doing a lot of this sort of robot foraging and conditioning and learning and whatever, and it felt a little bit restricted, because in the end you want to explain how humans operate, you know. So I was sort of looking for other paradigms to test these ideas. And JONATAS was, and still is, very active in the domain of interactive music systems, but in terms of music composition, not sonification necessarily. So then we started to talk about bringing these two domains together. So can't we then not link robots that learn about the world together with music composition systems? So the idea sounded great, and then we sort of shook hands, and I went back to the airport. But then Varrig, or Varigi, as they say in Brazil, sort of...
There's no Varrig anymore.
Exactly, they don't exist. No, but there's a good reason why that's the case, because they cancelled the flight. So I was stuck in Sao Paulo, and then I called JONATAS. I said, look, I'm stuck in Sao Paulo, so maybe we can do something now. So JONATAS came back from Campinas, picked me up in Sao Paulo, I went to the lab, and we were programming until the next flight left for Zurich. And that's where we programmed the first version of Roboser. And Roboser then was this interactive music composition system where you had a robot, let's say, if you want, generating the structured variability that would drive the composition engine. And from that came a whole series of events, performances, installations, whatever, but also things like the rehabilitation gaming system, ADA, and so on. JONATAS will probably talk about some of these. So this has sort of helped us to link, if you want, this domain of cognitive neuroscience, or synthetic psychology, and aesthetics. So on Monday we had Semir Zeki talking about the visual system, and not saying too much about his work in neuroaesthetics, but this idea of interpreting art from the perspective of science and neuroscience. In JONATAS' case, he comes from the other angle. So JONATAS is a mathematician by training, and a pianist and a composer. He has performed many pieces. He also is a conductor of orchestras. And JONATAS comes from the angle of really synthesizing musical pieces. So it's not describing what others do, it is really also generating the aesthetic content itself, which of course is a very different kind of perspective, because if you want to generate it, you better be clear about the principles, because you got to program it. And if you don't have well-defined specifications, you have no program. Okay? So it's great that JONATAS is here, and also with this broad experience he has both in math and the arts, and having collaborated with sort of these professional amateurs like ourselves, who do many things badly. It's just great that he's here, that he can show you also his perspective on that. And the other reason why it's important to actually pay attention to what JONATAS is talking about, JONATAS is also going to be one of the integrators in our discussion here, how we're going to bring all the pieces together for this BCBT performance we're going to give 1 week from now. Okay, so in that sense, Jonatas brings a lot of knowledge, expertise to the table, also for that discussion that we will start to initiate also today. So Jonatas, great that you're here. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us, and I'm looking forward to your talk, which seems to be very low entropy right now.
Okay. Will you listen?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me play here a bit with the computer. It's always a problem. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Let's go to the beginning. So, Paul really saved me time for the introduction. So, but actually, I would love to introduce a little bit the lab where I came from. So I'm from. Wow, that's too bad. But anyway, this is an interdisciplinary nucleus for sound studies, and actually, what we study is sound and music. And they start studying bioacoustic, linguistic, acoustic, music. And today we have a research from music, electrical engineering, computer science, mathematicians. It's around 20 people. We have been working with people, for example, from the robotics vision department at CTI in Campinas, the BRAIN, the Brazilian Institute for Neuroscience, SPECS, IRCAM, and other institutions. So, of course, today my talk is really about my collaboration, since Paul already described. But there's here a small video I want to show you. It's a rare video, really. I'm sorry about the quality of the video, but I would love to introduce you Roboser. Como se ele estivesse dançando. Ele modifica assim.
Die beiden Forscher haben ihrem Roboser in kürzester Zeit zusammen beigebracht, auf Bewegungen von Orbitbesuchern musikalisch Antwort zu geben.
Yeah, so actually it was the first ever performance of Roboser, and unfortunately it's the small piece, the only piece I have of it. Really, I tried, I have. That means we can have other. But anyway, that's for introducing you Roboser and how it started. We had this experience in Brazil with this small arena and performing K-Para with the light, going for light. And after we have this first experience in orbit, 1998. So most of my time here today, actually, I'm going to introduce you a little bit the principles of Roboser. Because I'm doing that, because I want you to give an idea of principles of link the behavior of machines with music. So that means my main task today. So I can talk about other things, but I hope today I can give you a talk really about what we call here, what I have called a synthetic algorithmic composition. So I have two quotes for you. This is Leibniz. Music is a hidden arithmetic exercise of the soul which does not know that's counting. Actually, he's a mathematician. He was the guy that has been developed the calculus and so on. And he's talking about exercise of arithmetics. So very complex and sophisticated. And there's here another quote from Igor Stravinsky. So that says, music is best understood by children and animals. So I want to start these two quotes and let you to think about what these two guys are trying to tell us. And I hope these very different ideas about music can be converged a little bit in my talk today. So the summary is that I will introduce a little bit about tools I need to let you understand the design of such systems we have been developed. So I will introduce you a little about parametric representation, algorithmic composition. I'll talk about Mozart's dice game, a little bit about perception and sound immersion. And after I go to the interactive composition this idea of using live interactive composition as laboratory. So that means I will talk in detail about Reboser, Ada, repercussion, and the multimodal brain orchestra. I go deeper in the beginning of the things, and as I move, I go a little bit in less details for the other things. So actually, the first thing I want to tell you is that musical representation has been evolved. I think the first representation have been in music is oral. People talk about music. There's no score before any kind of representation. And now we have a plenty of possible things. You have graphics, algorithms, spectrogram, audio descriptors, MIDI, and of course, the common practical musical notation. And as you can see, as we can work in terms of design, we can have three different approaches to design music and also to represent music. One I call symbolic. What I mean by symbolic? I mean by the representation that's when you use the score. Okay, you use the representation of notes, chords, and other things that has been developed under our culture, the Western culture. When I mean the other kind of representation is I call it process. So when I describe music as a kind of process that evolves in time in that way, I'm going to design a process that maybe can be very nice, suitable using computers. And of course, I would also describe music by audio. So today, the major concern of my talk today is about process and audio. And of course, computer models that can be used to, let's say, compose, to create music. And because I'm going to talk about process and audio, it might be possible so to connect the things with other behaviors, like the behavior of machines, behavior of people inside a room, or other things that we have been worked with. So let's talk a little bit about representation. Of course, some of you know the things, but I want to go from the beginning and evolve to more deep things. So one of the representation that is very well known around ourselves is MIDI. So, and that's called the MIDI protocol is based on three parameters. That's the note number, the velocity number, and duration. So that means note means the scales of representation. So that means you can have all these integer numbers that are connected to the keyboard piano, okay, that everybody knows. Velocity means about the intensity. That's not well done in MIDI. It's too little. It's compressed too much, the perception of intensity. Okay, and duration, that is done in seconds, milliseconds, that is not the integer representation, but as a real number. So, but this representation, it's very important, and also it's have been done in musical history, and I will say that this is an event representation because it's note-based representation. So we're talking about note. We have a discrete sequence or event in time, and we are describing music based on that. So a second one, a possible representation, is to use the spectrogram. So in that sense, we take the music is an acoustic phenomena. So, and we can see this based on the behavior of the distribution of energy in time. So that means you can have the spectrogram, we can have the waveform, the digitalized waveform. So in that sense, the representation we are talking about is audio signal representation. And for us, musicians, of people that use in musicology, is a sound-based representation. What's the difference between the first one and this one? The first one, we are talking about notes. Actually, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, whatever. Or we're talking about chords. And this is a little bit lower representation. We're not, of course, you can see chords, we can see patterns, but we are going a little bit more in the audio itself. So that means one representation is a higher level representation. Compared to that sound representation is a lower level representation. So that's it. But we can evolve from other parameters. So that means from pitch, material, you can perceive, so that means you can perceive the ratio between notes, and that gives us the idea of musical scales. We can have melodical, contour here, and intonation, so that means the way we perceive frequency psychoacoustically. So we have also the perception of rhythm. So rhythm is also, at least, depends on these three parameters: the perceived duration, that means one event and is compared to the other, and the pulse. Even if you see the durations perceived, we need to feel the pulse and also the beat. So they are different. The pulse is one more moving things, and the beat is connected to the bar when you have, for example, 4x4 and so on. And loudness also is the perceived intensity. You see, always I'm putting perceived, that means depends on the psychoacoustics. And also timbre. So when you talk about the instrument, when you talk about texture, and also spectral variation in time, as I showed you with the spectrogram before. So, and I want you to perform now one first step from the parametric representation to algorithmic composition. So that means if we might represent music in terms of those parameters, that's our representing the score and so on, we might use that representation to compose a piece of music. Of course, when a composer is writing common practice notation score, he is doing that. He is representing the music in a score. So, but how about algorithmic composition? So one of the first ever study algorithmic composition example is that the Mozart's dice game. So I want to listen to that a bit. So this makes sense, but what is there? So we have this idea of having, this is the manuscript of somebody, Mozart, who knows, but we can see here the representation of bars, okay? And so in such a way that you have the row and the columns. So the idea of the Mozart dice game is to assign for each of these bars and each of these columns in the bars a number. And because in the aesthetics of the classical era is very close, and people can hook the representation of bars in motifs, and motifs are connected to harmony. So in such a way, that means that you can actually make an exercise of combinatorics. So that means you can, using dice, for example, if you have this, if you play a dice, and you have this first bar here, and you play again the dice, and you have, for the second position, we would have this bar, for the third position, we would have this, and so on. So that's an example. And so what's there? What's there is a manipulation of the representation, symbolic representation, connects to this very important hook that says this glue of the classical era, that's the harmony. So that means if you permutate somehow the bars, but they are actually inside the same harmonic field, you will have a coherent sequence of tunes. But, as I always say to my students, but the score is not the music. Score is something to mediate music. So that means we need something else. Or only, it's the existence of music depends not only the representation of parameters, depends on other things. And I would like to introduce some of them. And one of the points I want to talk a little bit, it's these things. For example, I would say that when you listen to music, we are trying to anticipating things. So music is somehow connect our brain in time with anticipation of structures as other things we do in life. But music especially is doing that with our perception. Music is plenty. In music we have plenty of ambiguity. Always, for example, if you take a chord that might give you a kind of cadence, but it can be also understood in another context. So that means always if you're talking about a representation of a structural representation of music, we have to take care about the amount of ambiguity that you have in music. So, but music also has a kind of plasticity, as we have been talking about plasticity in many senses. But what I mean by plasticity in music, what I mean by plasticity in music, that means we can have music in our, in many things we do in life, especially we can have music in film, we have music in our cars as we drive, so that means music is somehow, it's adapted to many of our things we do in day by day. So of course, and music also, it's a matter of immersion. So that's, we're going to talk a little bit more about immersion in space and interactive immersion. That's our topic today. So that means there are still unanswered questions, many. So, and because of it, I would, I skip this one and I go to that, I come back. I want you to listen to this a little bit very soft and smooth music. And many of you had a bad time last night or a good time. Don't sleep, please. Okay. A small stop here. I hope you have heard something. Actually, the only aim here is to show you two things only. That's really what I need to let you to understand that we have two kind of movements, have two layers at least. One layer is very mellow, and it's very much hooked to the harmony. Actually, the harmony here is very important in the layer of the strings. So, and we have a second layer that is really based on the way these other instruments that are the woods and also the trumpet and so on, they are played. But actually, these two layers are very different from itself. One layer is very much harmonic, mellow-like. The other one looks like different. Somehow, it's not really connected to the beat as the other one is, because it's very slow, but it's there, you know. Even if you lose the notion of beat, but it's there, it's moving. and the other one is a little bit more, let's say, out of the beat. So that means when Charles Ives composed this, he wants to somehow use music to represent a kind of prosody or a kind of discourse. So I go a little bit more to show you after this presentation of the second layer, we have another one. This is the trumpet here. Now we have the trumpet and we have, actually there are 3 layers and they are very, very different from each other. Again. So, sounds ugly, Mary. The third layer, at least, is different from the other. It's very clear. So that means what we have here, we have a discourse, at least that's the way Charles Ives composed this in 1906, means that he tried to give an answer, an answered question that is performed by the trumpet, by the motive of the trumpet. And we have a very contrastant structure. That means people would say this third layer is somehow dissonant. I don't like too much this idea of consonant and dissonant, but actually it's organized different from the other one. Okay, and that's clear. So that means the only thing I need from today from you is to pay attention to that and see that it's clear that it's possible to manipulate anticipation, it's possible to manipulate the expectations of the listener playing with these things, you know. And this is very important. So I go back to one of the principles, the only one that I would use today for explaining this. And this is a very nice book that I recommend you to read if you want to have more ideas about expectation, meaning in music. And I will recommend Meyer books that emotion and meaning in music. So, and one of his basic principles is affect or emotion felt is aroused when an expectation, a tendency to respond, activated by the musical stimulus situation is temporarily inhibited or permanently blocked. So in the example I showed you, what I mean by expectation means that the first layer, the layer of the smooth strings, give us one expectation, or at least when you have a tendency that's somehow not so blocked, but also is contrapointed by the trumpet, the sound of the trumpet, the second sound. And also we have a third situation when we have the third layer is somehow is trying to interrupt the flow of information that's performed by the first layer of the strings. So, now, a second thing I want to play for you is the idea of sound immersion. So most of things I'm doing today is based on examples. So I hope you don't sleep. I hope you listen to them carefully. And most of the time people come here and show you graphics. So today I'm performing sounds. So the only thing I think I would like to make a difference here, actually I'm using drones not for the flying robots. I'm using drones, but you can use this to sonify robot. I'm using drones in the sense of the low frequency component sounds. And what I want to give you to pay attention is this principle that how low frequency components or perceived compared to the high frequency component. So let's play you this low frequency first. I can add another layer that's a little bit different. Look. Exactly in the same way Charles Ives did, but now I'm using these two layers together to make this beat-like sound. Okay? Okay, it's fine. Okay, thank you. So, but the other thing I want you to perceive is that the sound, the low frequency component, goes to you very directly. So now I'm going to perform high frequency. So that means in such a way that you can feel the dislocation, the diffusion of sound in space, and that's very clear. You can use that. So, look. I hope it's specialized enough for people that is on the back. You're gonna see very clearly this. One side, the other side, the moving of the sound. Here is not good. There is good because it's okay. I can add the other thing. Even I can have the low frequency component. A lot of noise for this morning. So, but now I hope you identify the layers, and one is project to you, the lower, and the high frequency is somehow surrounding you. So let's.
JONATAS, wait.
Oh.
Can you define what you mean with behavioral induction?
Where?
Go back one slide. Behavioral induction. Sound immersion is a way of behavioral induction.
That means if you use these locations, you can, for example, guide people in the space. You can connect movement of people in space. So that means we can, as we're going to show you in ADA, we have the behavior of ADA connect to sound, location, and that's the idea.
So it's specialization essentially.
Yes, exactly. So that means I need this concept to let you to understand further what we did with ADA. Okay. For the representation you have here, I will show you very briefly what it means by the drone. This one. You see the lower frequency component. You can see here. Okay. And beleza. So in here, you can see so different one from other. You can see that the energy of the spectrum is distributed differently. So you have more high frequency here, and you have this connect to the space. So that's what I need for today to let you understand the examples I'm going to play for the next session. That means, is it enough, the principles, how the spectrum is represented and how the spectrum is connected to sound and the behavior of the sound in space? So I need this for the next. So live interactive compositions laboratory. So now I'm going to try to explain you a bit about the things we have done. So some of these things are there in this chapter. Language, music, and the brain, a mysterious relationship, chapter 16, where you have a computational modeling of mind and music. I wrote with Paul. So most of these things are there. So now, it's a combination of multimodality using interactive media, improvisation, exploration of digital immersion, and study of human cognition and creativity using computer music, computer graphics, sensor device, biosignals, and motion caption. So the first thing I want to give you is that means we can actually explore these models about using performance. So that means you have improvisation. You can use this performance to control sonification, visualization in the context of mixed reality, also augmented cognition. So, and the way it's done is based on the idea of a model, the model that is somehow relates to, for example, the parameters I have showed you. The parameters can be based on notes, phrase, and so on, and also the parameters can be based on sound. So there are some of the things we have done, and this is give you an idea of the things we have worked with. And I will go for Roboser. That's I will have a little bit time on that. So the Kipera is the guy that performed it. So as I showed you the original small video of Roboser, we have this navigation system and the robots. The colors are associated to aversive states and color patterns were associated to occurrence of lights. And so that means by this navigation system, we associate music composition with the robot's adaptive control. So as you can see here, at the first moment, the robot tries to go to yellow, that's the boundary, and so on. It navigates around the light and go again, and suddenly it's gonna use the long-term memory call to navigate in space. So this was represented in terms of layers. So that means we have a light encounter, we have memory recall, we have collisions that are related to the robot's behavior, we have the aversive behavior, and so after the robot starts to navigate, as you can see here, we can have a representation of this behavior with the sound. So that means we hook the parameters of the music to the behavior of the robots in such a way that when the robot is completely navigated by the long-term memory call, we have a pattern that is describing the behavior in time of the long-term memory recalls. Okay? So I will show you a bit of this mechanism. One thing it was, so that means now I need you understand a bit the things I showed you previously. So we are associated the behavior of the robot with voice. So we have 4 voices, let's see. And this number here, or the MIDI numbers for the patterns. So that means when the robot is exploring this space, he would have this 4-voice musical profile. When there's a collision, he would have these numbers are MIDI numbers, okay? And so on. What's happened is based on this very simple set of pitch material, we can also modulate them relate to the rhythmic transformation. So that means, for example, when the robot is exploring, the rhythm structure is based on this number. That means we have a patterns of number that are associated to the exploration, and so on. So what I want you to have in mind is we have the exploration, we have the patterns, and the exploration change the pattern in time. And when the pattern in time is changed based on the event in the arena, we have changed global parameters. So for example, collision will increase tempo. As much the robots collide with something, as much the tempo is increasing. Aversion is going to decrease tempo. Light encounter does not change tempo. Appetite does not change tempo. And memory recall, it will make pitch shift downward chromatically and decrease tempo. So that means by associate this higher level symbolic behavior to the behavior, associate the musical behavior to the behavior of the robots, we can let the robot to explore the space, and the things are being done in space are going to be connected to the result, the composition result. So to show you the result, I will, I skip it because I will perform a bit of, yesterday I mixed up a bit some of the behaviors of the robots, and I will play you now in a piano-like piece. So there's no editing, this is only the thing. Okay, sorry. Actually, I hope you have got that there are changes associated to the behavior and change in the music. So I have presented them here in the spectrogram. That's, wow, it's not so easy to see it. But at least we can see that we have three spectral behavior, different, connect to the behavior of the robot in space. So if I play again, I will show you how it's related. So this one. Again here. Very low frequency here. So what I want to show you is that, so with this compositional engine, we are able to have some patterns that are controlled by MIDI. So, and the behavior of the robot change these patterns in time. So that means we can have a composition that is based on the change in the robot arena, that's such a way that we can have a different kind of music. We have a variation in music related to the behavior of the robots. So, and as much as we have done from that, we came to another experiment, let's say that, another installation, that's ADA. So ADA is somehow, we use these learnings from the robots to interact with people in the space. So let's show you, actually, ADA has to perform this kind of behavior: sleep, wake up, explore, group, play, and fatigue. So the idea of the sound design of the space is to relate the global behavior of Ada and its goals with the music. The music will represent somehow these goals of Ada was satisfied or not. Ada was performed for many people in 2002. And the only thing, of course, there are other things that I might show you, but what I want to show you is how this musical design of joy, sadness, anger was reflected in the Ada music soundtrack. First of all, I want to tell you how we did this soundtrack. It's based on two things. One thing is what you call the music soundtrack. The music soundtrack is gonna be related to musical patterns and motifs similar to the patterns that were performed by the robots or by the robots. And we have another layer that is related to sound noise, and that means give you cues for people to navigate in space. So I will play you a bit of some of the results. For example, when you sonify the behavioral Ada, that's wake up. You can see there's the low frequency component, these beats. So, another behavior, surprise. Surprise is a very important behavior in Ada. That means any change that happens in space will be somehow showed by the surprise, so that you can see here that you have this behavior of variation of glissando and going down. Let's see. So I play again. So in the next is the behavior of play. Surprisingly, let me see what I did here. Okay, now I will play you the whole piece one day in the Ada life, and I hope you can identify these musical patterns related to people's behavior and the spatial behavior of people and the other things that are performed by Ada. So actually it's sleeping. Wake up. Surprise and change in behavior. This is called explore. This you have heard playing. Surprise again. Going down low frequency is like pretty. People are playing. Other things. I hope you are able to identify the different behaviors related to the space, colors, and the sound. So the idea is music was the language that aids communicate with people, used to communicate to people. Sorry, I didn't get your point. Okay. Sorry.
How do people influence the music?
Of course. People influence the music basically by the floor is one of the most important communication. So that means you see there that the movement of people in space give you the relation between the position of people, and you can take measurements for activation and exploration based on the floor. And also sometimes using a finger, a camera, we can look at the behavior of special one people and see how this people is relate to the others. And this activation based on the one people behavior also activates the change in ADA. So that means every time ADA somehow identify a change in behavior, that means somebody that's somehow is doing something, only this person, they are trying to do something in group, this is also related to the music. So that means the behavior of people in the floor connect to the cameras and to the lights. The lights was another way of ADA communicates the change in behavior. You see that when it's sleeping, have bluish lights, and we have more activation, we have more bright lights. And so on. There's a continuous communication between people's behavior and the music. So that means it's not one way. So that means there are some assigned behaviors I showed you, but the change from one music to another behavior depends on the people's behavior collectively on the floor or individually connect to a camera that locates the behavior of somebody. If you have a question, please ask me. Okay, that's clear? That's clear? Okay. So next is repercurso. And actually, my time is going very fast. I have a lot of things to tell you, really. I have to run a little bit, sorry about, but it's really, I want to share many things. So let's go a little bit about the impression of repercurso. What means repercurso? So if you compare ADA to repercurso is somehow different, and we are going to try to re-repercurse, let's say like that, in the end of this conference. But what means repercurso? Repercurso means a performance where we have two musicians interact with a virtual, let's say, agent with an avatar. So the idea is the behavior of the musicians or the performers, the dancer and the percussionist will somehow make an influence in the behavior of the avatar, and by change the behavior of the avatar, the musician, that's percussionist, and the dancer will also change their movement. So to make it possible, we have to develop a kind of language. So the first thing we developed was the generative matrix of rhythmic structures. So this is very much based on taiko drum sounds. I hope Anna remembers it. So this is the starting of the whole story. So that means this sound here, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. So this is, or the basic structure that's what we've started to develop repercurso. So that means we take this starting rhythmic structure and we ask the percussionist to perform it. But as this percussionist is performing it, we take the duration of these musical patterns to guide the response of other things in space in such a way that the performance in the beginning of each session, so we have one session, move to another session, make an influence in the next session. So that means the first section we call prologue. The second session we call the exploration of space. That means when when the dancer is coming, and after we have this dialogue with the avatar, and the fourth session is the avatar solo, and also the percussionist and the dancer will watch the avatar solo. So I go a little bit fast. That means to make a communication between people that are performing repercussion and also performing the dancer. So we develop a graphic notation in such a way that means you can communicate behavior by the graphic notation. So that means the score of repercussion looks like this one. So we have the tiger, we have the folias, that means, or a small sequence that is going to be performed. So at the end, we have this scheme. That means you have the ground, you have the floor, we have microphones, have a lot of things happen here by the percussionist and the dancer. We have the whole system of lights, and we have here the system of machines that are going to take some data from the floor, from the behavior of the dancer and the percussionist, and use that to drive the behavior of the avatar and also the scenario of her percursor. So I have some nice photos, really like this. So we have this and so on. So let's play a little bit her percursor to you. It's nice to see again the matrix. I stop a little bit, I'll go further a little bit more, but I want you relate what you have heard with the examples I gave you in the beginning in terms of design. So I hope you heard that there is this low frequency component that is represented by the voice. So that means it somehow is omnipresent in the whole soundtrack. And some change that happens in the behavior of people in space are represented by the high frequency components, as I hope you heard. So that means by having these two layers of sonification, we can identify these lower frequencies as the behavior of the interaction between movements in space and the high frequency or change that happens between, for example, when the percussionists do something more strong, or if the dancer do a movement that something is changed, different from the normal pattern or the regular pattern. So I play a little bit more. The dialogue between the dancer and the avatar. Solo, avatar solo. So as you saw before here, we have this movement of Africa. So that means there are specific movement assigned to a specific sound behavior. For example, this like whispering sounds, as you heard, was somehow related to her expression of breath. So that means when some movements are performed by the dancer, this recognition of the movement or somehow how she's behavior in space will trigger the sonification. So in some ways, it's also somehow related to ADA sonification, but in that case, there are two agents. That one is a percussionist, the other one is a dancer, and their behavior, their communication and change and improvisation are going to change the third behavior, that's the behavior of the avatar. So, time is going very fast. So, and the last thing I want to show you is multimodal brain orchestra. Tony told me that he was there sitting there when you performed the first ever multimodal brain orchestra together with people. So I have a lot of things to tell you about that, but I go short. Sorry, because time. But anyway, one thing I want to show you with my talk is this evolution of the system we have been developed on sonification, behavior, and the way we use sound to interact with people, interact with behavior, and also interact with the models that we are working with. In this case, so that means multimodal brain orchestra, we have an interest to connect first time the behavior of the sonification, the behavior of the music, not with an explicit behavior of people in space as we did previously. So people are walking, people are doing gestures. So that means in multimodal brain orchestra, the idea was to connect the sonification and the visualization with the implicit. So that means the implicit behavior of the performance in such a way that we can use EEG. Also, we can use the skin conductance and the heartbeat as a way of controlling the music itself. So in that sense, we have two kinds of, let's say, agents, two kinds of performers. Actually, I would say three, but let's talk about two, and after I add a third one. One is the brain performers. So the brain performers, they are going to perform the music based on cues that are given by a conductor. That is not a conducting time, but giving them cues to look at some reference, some lights or some letters. And the second performer we call the affective performer, that I don't see Encarne here anymore. Encarne was, yeah, she's in Rome. So Encarne was our affective conductor. So, and the system looks like that. So we have these two brain performers that we are taking the P300 signal from their brain cap, and we have the other two brain performers we taking CCVP, SSVP, sorry, performer. And these four guys, they are anticipating somehow, so that means cues that are going to give to them by the conductor. What the conductor does. So I had 4 signals. And the signals are very simple, and they are mean things and for the performance. So for example, for the P300 guys, they have to identify some letters in a display. So, and these letters relate to my signals. So what's happened is, it's like the conductor is improvising by giving cues to people. People are interpreting the cues. The cues are activating small pieces of music that are there based on specific predefined motifs, as we have done also in Repercurso. But in that case, the specific motif are based in two layers. One layer is the musical layer. That means it's performed by MIDI-like events that looks like an orchestra, looks like a string orchestra. And the second layer is the layer of sounds. So that means will be performed like soundscapes, as we already heard. So as these two things are performed together by the cues of the conductor, we have here the affective agent that we are taking skin conductance and heartbeat and have a glass. Everything that have been used here, some of you are going to use there, or you're going to use in your experiment. We are taking this and send to a second computer, and these parameters are change the visualization, change the graphics, change the way the graphics are performed to people. So that means the music affects somehow the affective agent, and the affective agent by change skin conductance, by the cognitive load of the eyes movement and so on, change the visualization. So that means we have a chain of communication, you have a layer of communication, but we go from sound to affective or affection, and affection change the graphics.
But it also changed the composition engine settings.
Exactly.
Not only the vision, also the sound.
No, yes, but the composition engine is changed by this part of the circuit.
No, but also the effective agent was setting emotional content for the composition engine.
It's yes. In some starting point it is the starting of the patterns. Yes. Okay. So let's perform you a little bit of multimodal brain orchestra.
Multimodal Brain Orchestra, the world's first mind power orchestra
Yes,
using brain-computer interfaces, plays X Motion.
So
The Brain Orchestra members play virtual musical instruments through BCI technology alone. When
oh, sorry. I want to show people here. He's not here anymore. André, Kiki is here.
Yeah,
Kiki's not here, but Carmen is here. So there's the team of the brain performer were some of the guys that are worked at the time here. So that means the conductor gives the cue, and these two guys they identify the cue, and by looking at the lights, blinking lights, so they are going to activate part of the compositional. Let's tell you what they do. These first two guys, Armin is here. Armin was studying here. Is going to change articulation and change the loudness. Kiki was responsible to change the sound cues in space. So that means when I give him a signal like this one or this one, he's going to identify my signal and is going to add some noise or some sound in the whole composition. And the Japanese guy that I forgot his name, I don't remember, he will also change the location of the sound in space. So in such a way, you have these whole parameters being connected to the behavior of people. Let's put a little bit more this now.
an emotional
Let's put a little bit. You can see now the layer of the multimodal brain orchestra that's connected to MIDI. So that means it looks like a string orchestra. As I told you, you have two layers, the layer of the music and the layer of the sound signals or the soundscape. Let's put a little bit of this. Look. Let's see. String. Yeah, now you see the pattern that is coming. Jung's expression of harmony.
An emotional conductor interferes with the affective content of this multimodal composition by means of her physiological state. Through glasses, she's been shown images from a sequence created by artist Vedad Rezazadeh, while her heart rate and skin conductance are being measured. In X Motion, the audience will witness how experience can be created through direct interfaces to the brain and the body, thus bypassing the volitional body-centered control that defines the common modus operandi of human existence.
So I hope you identify partially what I want to tell you is the way the design of this composition, this sonification was done. I hope it's clear, okay? We have one layer, one track that is connected with the MIDI controlled, that is controlling like this string quartet sounds. Have another layer that's connected to the sound and the location of the sound. And these were coordinated by the signals of the conductor. So that means by having these connections between the signal of the conductor and the change made by the affective conductor, let's say, we have these cycles. And this goes along with the visuals of Vedad Rezazadeh. That means a kind of story that it tells people about a change in behavior that as is performed. So how long can I have more 10 minutes? Can I? So I will show you two recent things that we might work together around here in our summer school. One is these things that's called topomorphic sonification. I go a little bit fast, but the idea is to connect somehow the structure of the connectome to sound in such a way that people can navigate inside the connectome using sounds as cue to navigation. So again, I'm repeating many things, but I hope it's for pedagogical purpose. So that means, again, the sonification is going to be related to some sound. And as I guess you have heard, I don't use too much the reference of, let's say, melodic structure only. I use sounds as reference. I prefer, because I think sounds and change on timbre give us more strong feelings about change. Timbre is very effective in terms of feeling the change based on sound. So what we have the connectome. You have the relations between the connectome navigation. We have an engine in pure data. And pure data changes some behaviors of people inside the connectome. And we have a synthesizer that's based on the behavior and based on the signal processing we apply here, produce sound. So we have been, I will show a little bit this for you. And some of you maybe is going to, if you have interest, we can do that together later on. So you can see this is the navigation external sound. Have the movement. So I hope you have an idea of what's going on. So Penny is there, she's moving her hand and she's looking for some areas inside the structure as she points to some specific place. The specific place, the coordinate of the specific place is sent to the pure data engine. We have in the pure data engine specific sounds for specific areas of the brain, but also the behavior, the dynamic behavior. For example, if you raise your arm, if you move down, if you move around, or change some parameters of the sonification. Such ways, for example, we have this movement is assigned to change the filter so that we will have a low frequency filter assigned to the movement. The sound is going to be lower in frequency, not in pitch, have more bass, and so on. So actually, and to finish, and I hope it's pleasing you, I will perform what we have done last year with some guys here. We have also did these concerts called Ventanias. And I have been developed last year here. This sonification system that you may try this in this summer school, that's very much related to connect directly the representation of some graphics with sounds in such a way that if you change the graphics, you change the sound location, you change also the timbre because you change the synthesis engine. You have 4 different synthesis engines. So, and there are a lot of other parameters that I want to only to show you a bit of this to finish, and it's done. Of course, you can see it's done there in XIM. We have the patterns, we have the control system. So a person sitting there can somehow compose together sound and image and perform just 2 things together. So very nice noise. Before I say 1 minute. So the only thing I want to tell you is this quote from Xanax. So before I end, he said, "I do not think that any attempt to consider music like a language can be successful. The substruct of music is much closer to the substruct of space and time. Music is pure, much closer to the categories of the mind." So I hope it inspires you. And what I really hope is that many decisive steps in the process of creativity and discovery rely on implicit factors rather than explicit ones. So it's possible to explore these factors to validate a mixed reality, implicit and explicit presence delivery system linked to expressive experience in artistic domains. And I really hope we can advance our understanding of interplay between computer intelligence and creativity by placing human experience in expressive and artistic domain at the center of the solution. That's it. Thank you.
All right, JONATAS, thank you. That is a huge tour covering almost 20 years, if not more. Do you have questions for JONATAS? Yes, please.
Hello. You didn't answer the question.
What's the question?
The unanswered question.
The unanswered question. Ah, okay.
I think the question is whether music, is this music?
What is is the music?
The question of Charles Ives was, what is music?
The question of Charles
At least
Ives.
that's what I got it by.
No. Charles Ives
Maybe
was
not.
connected to some philosopher at the beginning of the century, and the entire name of the Charles Ives composition is the unanswered question of human existence. This is a little bit further, but
Well,
what?
you can still give the answer.
Yeah. But the point is, what I want to show you. I try to show you how we can play expectation with people using different materials. And it was there clear, I hope it was clear, that there was a very first material that is very mellow-like structure with chords, okay? Have a second material that was played by the trumpet. Ta, ta, ta. And we have another layer that was performed by the woods. So my intention by performing this piece, because I think it's very pedagogical, it can teach us, let's show us how can we play with expectation, because I understand that after having performed the first mellow-like structure, the next structure, that's the trumpet, somehow it's strange compared to the first one, somehow different, somehow contrasting. But after have been played and performed, it established a relationship between the first one and the second one. So that means, what I mean is that when we work with music, it's interesting to use variation, variety between material to give people's change in emotion. I think change in emotion in music is very much based on change on variety and different kinds of sounds or different kinds of motifs. Depends on kind of sonification you're going to use in your design. So I can raise questions in music using variation of material. That's, I think, my message with Charles Ives.
There are certain rules between, because you have Roboser, you have you have many different, let's say, systems. Is there any specific rule that all of these systems follow in terms of the production of music and how, for example, the rhythm change, or they are all discrete systems with different composing engines in a way?
Actually, what we have tried using this system like Robosa and the other, trying to have lower level rules and use the process of interaction to drive the composition. For example, in Robosa, that was the first one where I tried to show you, it's very, in a deep sense, the connection between the behavior of the robot in the arena and the music composition were based on change of motifs. So that means when there is a change, we change the motifs of the pitch patterns of MIDI. Also, we have a general change like global change like tempo, have a global change like we change durations. But actually, we are not applying a global rule. We're not saying now make Beethoven symphony, or different from the Mozart dice game, that the music is very much inside a context. When I have the harmony and we make a permutation of bars that are also inside the context. All these systems, as we try to, they have a lower level rules related to lower level of musical behavior. Can be consonants, dissonance. For example, the drones that I played, they are low frequency, and I have the second one that's lower frequency, but we have a kind of beat, dissonance between. So that means we don't use, in the sonification, a higher level of rules. We have local rules that are going to be controlled by the behavior of people, the robots, and these local rules being controlled by the system is going to perform the music.
Yeah, but what I meant to say is that, so let's say you have certain events that trigger different, let's say, different patterns or changes in the music, right? Even if they're local ones, as you said, like pitch or tempo or timbre. Um, regard, each interaction in each of these systems is different. What I was wondering is whether, for example, in all of these systems you apply a certain change in tempo that is similar among, even if there are different events that are triggering it. If you apply the same change in tempo when an event happens at a lower level.
Okay.
There are certain rules that maybe they create some musicality that is pleasant.
Yes, Vic, thank you. I understand your question. I will try. There are some basic parameters that we are change. For example, most of the movement change in space, we are relating to change in tempo. Okay, so there's people move. You have, for example, in ADA, when you have an activation in the floor, it's going to be drive in the music soundtrack changing tempo. That's very, very, very simple. For example, in sonification, the last sonification, the movement in space does not change tempo in that case, but change the components, the spectral components. So that means if you move if you have the azimuth of the movement and you have this spherical coordination locating in space, we are adding some spectral contents. So that means what we guess? We guess by adding some spectral contents in the sound, people are getting more attention.
Okay, great.
A third way of doing that, we have done, I didn't show you, but we have done this experiment with Alzheimer's patients. So there's a lot of things we have done. So in that sense, we are adding, we have sounds that have very basic sounds properties. Like we apply consonance and dissonance. We have changed the timbre from natural sounds to musical sounds. And this change also the sonification. One thing I try to is to use the synthetic sounds correlate to, let's say, the natural sounds. The last example of Chroma Chromos is completely synthetic. I hope it looks like a machine music. It's really made by machine. It's a computer itself. So there are, so I hope you understand some of them.
Thank
And
you
I can
very
talk a lot about it.
Another question?
What parameters from the EEG, because the data get it from an EEG is super complex, and you were mapping really concrete things to concrete actions.
Exactly.
How did you do the mapping of the cerebral?
Okay. So actually, the multimodal brain orchestra looks like an exercise of combinatorics in the first level, and have to have a dynamic change. So that means the EEG is triggering events in the MIDI layer. So in the MIDI layer, we have a set of small patterns that were previously composed by myself, and these are connected to voice. We have the violin, first and second violin, the viola, and the cello. They are composed in cycles, in such a way that the cycles, they are not, if they are superimposed, they still make sense, because there's the same harmony. So in that sense, I'm using the technique of Steve Reich, or patterns. So these layers, they are triggered by the two first brain performer. So what they are triggered? The first brain performer, when I give a cue, is gonna, if I give this, for example, this means A. So this is gonna look at the A, the letter A. When you have a signal, the P300 signal, the systems recognize this signal, and will trigger in the database of motifs one that is assigned to that letter. Okay?
Okay, but it will be similar if they just have like 4 buttons, each of them, and press the
Exactly,
button. It's
exactly.
only a on-off.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one control. The second control is a continuous control that was done by the affective conductor. So that means there are many parameters in music that are continuous, like tempo. Tempo's changing time, but in the multimodal brain orchestra, we control this articulation. You know, I mean by articulation. But articulation music, articulation is how the two events are controlled in time. If they are very much together, we say it's legato. If they are somehow spread over, we say staccato. So that means these can be continuously controlled by change the inter-onset time. So the inter-onset time that changes these dynamic, these continuous parameters is also correlated to the affective conductor.
There's also an easy answer to the question because you will want to know how we dealt with the EEG data, right? And basically we use 2 standard BCI methods there, which on the one hand the P300.
Okay, yeah.
Using a classifier, so people are looking at different characters.
Okay.
And then the classifier associates their EEG state with that specific symbol. So now JONATAS can say, look at symbol A, read out the brain state, goes into the composition engine. And the other one, for the other 2 people, we use the steady state visual potential.
Yes.
Basically it means if you have a flickering light, your visual cortex will flicker at the same frequency. So these guys are looking at this box with a number of LEDs flickering at different frequencies, and they are then instructed by the conductor to look at one of these LEDs, and that then defines the event that goes into the composition engines. This is how the signal, so it's standard BCI techniques. Okay?
And then the videos that were more like artistic with this emotional content were only for the audience, were not for the performer.
No, the video, which was an emotional narrative, but the idea is logically it doesn't make any sense, but you have these bursts of highly invoking stimuli, right? So you might see things that are scary or very happy or very sexual or whatever, very rapidly. So this will now modulate the emotional state of the human observer. So we had this emotional conductor with a head-mounted display who was watching this material, and this was modulating her emotional state, which you can then pick up in heart rate and galvanic
Skin conductance, yeah.
And then from that we extracted arousal and valence, so the 2-dimensional space, which you also saw on the display that the audience saw, and then these 2 parameters go back into the composition engine to set valence and arousal of the musical expression. Okay, that's how we close that loop.
And what I say about articulation is connected to arousal.
Other questions? So there's one thing, JONATAS, that we have to think about, because we talk about also aesthetics, we talk about beauty. So what are the rules of beauty that you think you have identified in this whole trajectory of building these installations and performances? What are the rules of beauty that we can really build on?
Okay. Okay, I will answer in a different short answer. I think beauty correlates with diversity. I think our perception looks for diversity and change in space. For example, all the things we have been done in terms of sound is trying to augment the diversity. I think I have very much an idea of beauty connected to the behavior of nature. So that means if you have more diversity, you have to looking around things differently. You have more an expression of beauty, and the coherence of this diversity can be expressed in music or can be expressed in other things. So that means what we have learned, I hope, is that diverse plays an important role in this kind of perception.
The classical view of beauty is about proportion.
Yeah, but this is
the classical view of beauty
see,
is exactly
like
the
Greeks,
opposite.
Yes, like the Greek says.
Yes.
So, but I'm not saying I'm using that.
Okay.
My idea about beauty is how diverse pleases us, because I think ambiguity is very important for us. I think we are looking in an ambiguous way, like in music and other art. This ambiguity pleases us. And we have this reward of trying to guess around ambiguity and see what's going on and anticipating it.
This is but I think this is something that was implicit in your talk,
Yeah.
that we can articulate more, which is what you're doing by connecting the composition engines to the real world, is that you try to find this balance in the predictability and the unpredictability of the system. You try to have a controlled sense of variability. And this is, I think, also if you talk about Mozart's dice game,
It's very
right?
controlled.
It has to do with controlled variability.
But it's
And
very,
this is-
very
but this is-
restricted.
yeah, but this is a big distinction with what people call computer creativity, where you largely rely on computers doing something that looks like the product, that imitates the product of human creativity, but very much dependent on, let's say, random numbers, right? So uncontrolled variability. And I think in a hidden principle that you now articulated is the idea of controlled variability. I think this is a very important component of what you could call beauty.
Yeah, in such a way, but I think beauty is derived by you feeling of controlled variability, or some variability.
But
There's somebody there, that's one. No, you're one. Okay, Clement, of course.
It's not a question, but just we have a computational framework to deal with controlling predictability or diversity, as the one that Daniel presented yesterday, about this embodiment or all this artificial curiosity algorithm. So we have algorithms that are able to keep a good trade-off between what the agent knows and what the agent doesn't know, and to look for variability and predictive outcome of what it does. So generating a aesthetic with algorithm that way, I'm not sure it has been done, but it's probably something that should be done. I mean,
You're absolutely right, and you are situating yourself correctly in space and time, because that's why now in BCBT we want to bring these components together. But I think it was important to articulate this issue of let's say surprise, the control of surprise as one of the key drivers of aesthetic experience, right? Of the epistemic emotion that you might call beauty.
But all this
right?
concept of surprise, all this concept of surprise, diversity, predictability, they all rely in the field of this new intrinsic motivation kind of models. So we have many frameworks for generating this. And it's applied now in like studying development or modeling development, but not really in modeling creativity.
Seeing is believing, young man. And beauty doesn't rely on the framework. The framework describes what you might want to call beauty, right?
But actually, the only thing I would add is that it's not sufficient to only manipulate the parameters of any compositional system, because as I said, the score is not the music. You have to add to this component some variety, and the connection with the real world interaction plays a very important role, because it's like you're performing. So that means it make this performance acting
sure, I understand.
very productive to the diversity.
But to also then pick up on Clement's challenge, in some sense, given that we have composition engines, we have different real-world systems,
Okay.
we can start to compare different frameworks, right, that claim to balance or control surprise.
There are different
to then
methodologies.
also
Yes,
do
yes.
our own psychoacoustical test on that.
Yeah, my point is that is somehow psychoacoustic somehow connected to other things. That means we are looking for. I think our challenge
Sure, as you
around
showed in your last,
it's all the things
Right.
and so on.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, I wanted to ask because, you know, when you ask someone to listen to a music or a sound and to evaluate that sound if it's beautiful or not, if that person you tell that the music was generated with a computer or a machine, or it was done by a person, they usually prefer the one made with for a person. So I'm wondering if art is something that only humans can create, because it seems that people prefer things made by humans and not for machines. So, yeah.
Okay, I think you're talking about the Turing test challenge. We have been done some of these Turing tests telling people that is played by machine and is not played by machine. With robots at the beginning, and also with Ada soundtrack. I think one point is about being generated by a machine or being played by a machine. It's not only about the way you design the composition. But there's a point here when a machine plays a song, like a computer, you play the tempo in a very restricted way. And when a person play music and play the tempo, it performs a very small variation. And so that means this small variation in tempo, and small variation in articulation, and also in the inter-onset time, plays a lot in terms of people recognizing this, what is coming from. It's played by a machine or it's played by a human. One of our goals, many in our the design that we have done, is really try to play with articulation. Because
But JONATAS, you're forgetting something really
what
important.
I forget?
In 2003, our soundtrack won a prize for best
Yes.
movie soundtrack
Okay,
in
but
the Swiss Oscars.
Yeah.
And because the point was, there was some really stupid, retarded production company that, without our knowledge, just took the music from the Ada exhibition and put it underneath some movie they produced about something completely different, which was a stupid production anyway. But then it won the prize, but we hadn't signed like Ada or the computer machine. No, the production company had their sound engineer sign off on the soundtrack, so he got the prize. Okay? So I think there's no better way to win the musical Turing test than this way. Okay? They just ripped us off, took our music, but it was all computer generated, and they won the prize. And the human got it, right?
But the point is there, the Ada soundtrack was modulated by the real-time behavior. That's very important. So how you modulated because previously when you talk about algorithmic composition, before we have using live interactive composition, people are playing rules and the computer generate the sequence. So that means in that sense, we don't have the performative side of music inside the generative process. In our attempt, since the beginning, we try to use the performative aspect of music as part of the generative system. So that means we are trying to add this component to make more, let's say, more truthful, more musically oriented the result. I think it's the idea.
Tony.
You started at the beginning with some quotations, and you had Igor Stravinsky saying that his music is only understood properly by children and animals, and I was puzzled by that. I can see how children have a more immediate and less intellectual response to music, but I think animals do not respond to music in the way that people can, and I don't know of an animal that really responds to music in that way. I mean, I saw last week there's a new music system designed to help your cats relax.
Yeah.
But I don't know how effective this is. So I wonder what you think Igor Stravinsky meant by that. And isn't it more the case that music is actually a bit like language, that it's something that is, if not uniquely human, it's something that we've evolved that really helps us to stand out from the rest of the animal kingdom, that we have this ability to understand and perceive musical rhythms and musical sounds, and to recognize that they have semantic content as well as just the pure sort of experiential side that sort of inspires emotions in us.
I agree. So the point is, I think music can be connected, can be communicate with any kind of, to human, to animals. But the point is, I think the problem we have is after the Romanticism, we assume in terms, the music is a very high level of representation in symbolic terms. And this is a very much human concept of music. So that means the representation and the way we persuade also the doctrine of affection from the Baroque, how they are connect music to affection. I think this is a very higher level and very, very symbolic. What I'm trying to tell you, that means music is related to people and to animals, as Stravinsky said, because there are more very, very, very primitive, or let's say more very much brain mechanism that are very related to music. If you are human or if you're animal, and because of it, I think it's a good idea to think about anticipation. Anticipation is very much related to our system of any kind of animal looking for deviation, and is controlled this behavior by anticipation. So you have a lot of connections with music, and I would say to my students that music in some sense is like our personal training of emotions, but because it plays with this kind of mechanism, and that in that sense animals and people, they are much related to music.
Daniel?
I wanted to comment on the animals not understanding music. I would say I suggest you watch the YouTube movies of, for example, Snowball, which is a kakadu, I think. Where it's not a parrot, but similar. And when it reacts to music and reacts differently to music, it makes dances. It makes headbanging. It understands music. And there's another example which I myself witnessed personally, which is, I don't know exactly where this phenomenon comes from. It was Seattle Aquarium. We had a conference there. They did a party, and they had some disco music and the party. And I went around in the aquarium. There was a little shark standing on his tail and moving like that with the rhythm of the music. This is not an invention. I have no movie, unfortunately. It was absolutely incredible. It really felt, perhaps it just felt the rhythm. No. It was in the aquarium, and it was a small shark, so 30 centimeters long. But the striking thing was, it really went with the music.
Yeah, you're describing a phenomenon that I'm looking some students to study with me. That's what we call in literature rhythmic entrainment. That's I want to learn it and understand it further. If there are any student here that wants to study it, I would love to work together, because I think rhythmic entrainment is a phenomenon that is very interesting. That's what you describe. Oh, look. Amazing.
Okay, Tony, what do you think about that? What's your defense?
I would think that actually birds would be an exception.
No, so, but this example show that this is a specific thing about rhythmic entrainment. It's very, there's not many people studying it yet. Mm-hmm. Who?
I'll think of you the way.
After this many years, I finished my talk with.
And love you.
also exceptions for dogs, Tony?
This is getting closer to the clever hand.
Okay. All right, other questions for Jonatas?
No, we have plenty, you know.
All right, so
I would expect to finish with dogs song. Thank you, guys.
Inspiration for the BCBT Song Festival. Okay, you can beat the cockatoos and the dogs, I'm sure. All right, coffee break. We're back here at 12:30 for the battle, right? Okay. The duel. The